Hey everybody, Colonel Dracus here, getting ready to do a new Codex review here for you for the Adeptus Mechanicus. So let's take a look. I was a little late in getting the book. My local game store was closed on release day, so I picked it up on that Wednesday afterwards. But I've been kind of coming through it, trying to take a look and see what kind of cool combos and stuff are in there. And I did get a game in. So this is a little bit of a review of the book and just some little tidbits of what I found. Really cool cover art. Let's just start off with that. Cover art is really cool. I like that picture. And we get into the just the basics of the introduction, your table of contents here, and then again that piece of cover art, and start getting into some of the fluff. Pretty standard for the new books as far as the layout goes. So you've got your fluff, the red planet, keepers of the divine lore. So it goes over like the new different holy orders. These kind of started with the Engine War book, and then they kind of fleshed it out a little bit more here, changed them. The Skitarii Legion. So I always like these drawings of the weapons. Not only is it just cool to look at, but it definitely helps as for new players to know what each gun actually looks like, because they don't always provide in the instructions or whatever, names of what each of the little bits and stuff are. So I know that always helped me as a new player. Warzone Metallica. A little bit of a story here on the Warzone Metallica that we've been going through. The Arcane and the Ancient. So this is a little bit backstory for some of the units. The Servitors, Iron Strider, Engines, Electro Priests. Legio Cybernetica, you get the Castellan Robots and the Data Smiths. So I know that they used to do it to where like every unit gets a section, and I didn't find that with this one. So I did see that was kind of interesting that they changed that. Let me see if I can get some more light over here, so maybe there's not as much shadow on the book. Let's see if this helps. There we go. So there's that. And then a little bit of information on the Forge World. So Mars, of course, being the main one. Belisarius Call. Big Boy himself. Again, that's another really cool image. I always like a lot of the art that's in these books. It's very cool, very evocative. Lucius. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways, Agrippina or Agrippina. So that's another Forge World there. Styges or Styges. And then what's that? Graia, right? Graia. A lot of weird names. You gotta try and figure it out. Metallica and Ryza, and then some of the sub ones. Voss Prime. That's a cool yellow and red kind of split color scheme. There's some more lore. Get some cool pictures now. Pictures are always fun to look at. Talk about different, again, a little bit more information here for like, alright, well that's a radium carbine, that's a plasma, the power sword and the arc pistol. Talk about the different sigils and squad markings. More squad marking stuff here for the Sulfur Hounds and the Cerberus Raiders. I did notice in the book here that all of the Castellan robots have the old weapon loadouts. They didn't do any with the new weapon loadouts, which we'll get to later. So they all always have double guns or double fists. And just as a little sneak peek, you could mix and match now. Alright. More pictures. More pictures. And then we finally get to the rules. So we'll have the Battle Forged rules with the detachment abilities, stratagems, and holy orders. Then the army rules with the warlord traits and relics. Match play rules, so you get your new chapter approved. Secondaries. Crusade rules, that'll have your all your agendas and your unique relics and stuff in there. Then finally data sheets, war gear, points, and then a reference. A little page on the combat patrol. So this is the new box set that they came out with the engine seer, your 10 Skitarii Vanguard or Rangers, and then your 3 Cataphren Servitors, which can be breachers or destroyers. And then you get your Dooncrawler. Detachment abilities. So this one was important. An Adeptus Mechanicus detachment that only includes models with the Adeptus Mechanicus keywords, excluding Agents of the Imperium or unaligned keywords. So they will gain Forge World Dogmas. They'll gain the Knights of the Cog ability, and then troops in the Adeptus Mechanicus detachment gain objective secured. So the Knight of the Cog is interesting. It doesn't really actually do too much. I was hoping to find more Knight of the Cog stuff in the book, but it's not actually that prominent. The Forge World Dogmas. This is basically your chapter tactics for whatever Forge World you take. And then Knight of the Cog. Each detachment in your army with this ability, you can select one Questoris Mechanicus Super Heavy Auxiliary in your army. Models in that detachment gain the Knight of the Cog keyword. So you could take a Imperial Knight that is a Questoris Mechanicus, and then they gain Knight of the Cog. And that is only for Super Heavy Auxiliary, so it's a one model. Alright, then your Forge Worlds here. Just giving you overall how to use your Forge Worlds. And so for Mars, the Dogma, so Skitarii units with this Dogma gain the Canticles of the Omnissiah ability. So the Canticles are different than what they were before. And then each time a unit with this Dogma is selected to shoot or fight, you can reroll one hit roll when resolving that unit. So it's kind of like, what is it? Some of the other armies have something similar. I think like Salamanders, Space Marines can reroll a hit. So it's just every time a unit attacks, you get one reroll for that unit. It's not per attack, it's not per model, it's the unit. So that's important to remember. I forgot that plenty in my practice game. I think I finally remembered it in turn 3. So, but that is important. You'll want to remember that. Then their Warlord trait is select one friendly Mars Cult Mechanicus core unit within 6 inches. And then select one Canticle. This can be one that has already been active for your army until the start of your next command phase. This Warlord and that unit benefit from that Canticle instead of the one that's currently active from your army. So you get to change out your Canticle for the model with the Warlord or with the Warlord ability trait, and then for one other Cult Mechanicus core unit within 6 inches. So there's quite a bit of requirements in order to meet that. Then their unique relic is the Red Axe. Let's see, so it replaces an Omniscient Axe, range melee, type melee, plus 2 strength, minus 5 AP and 2 damage, but each time you fight you make 3 additional attacks. So most of the Tech Priest models that are going to have the Omniscient Axe to replace are not very fighty, so plus 3 attacks really helps out. Minus 5 is amazing. You're going to go through pretty much all armor. They have to rely on an invulnerable save. And then Wrath of Mars changed quite a bit. It used to be just 6s to wound, did mortal wounds in addition. It still is that, but it caps out at 6 mortal wounds. And then it costs 1 or 2 command points depending on the power level of the unit. So if the unit has a power level of 11 or more, it costs 2. So 10 or less, it costs 1. Which is an important distinction because of some of the power level changes in the book also. The biggest one with this would be the Castellan robots. They went from 2 robots being 12 power to only 10 power. So if you take 2 Castellan robots, it'll only cost you 1 CP, where before it would have cost you 2. So that's an important change there. We've got Lucius. Their Dogma is Solar Blessing. Each time an attack with a damage characteristic of 1 is allocated to a model with this Dogma, add 1 to any armor saving throw made against for that attack. So it's similar to All Is Dust for like the 1,000 Suns, which is good. Makes your basic troops turn into a 3-up armor against damage 1, which is good. And then add 3 inches to the range characteristic of models with this Dogma, or for ranged weapons that this models with this Dogma are equipped with. So plus 3 inches, always good. And then their Warlord trait. Select 1 Lucius core unit within 9 inches of this Warlord. So it doesn't matter if it's Scutari or Cult Mechanicus. Until the start of your next command phase, each time an attack made against that unit, an unmodified roll of a 1, 2, or 3 for that attack fails, irrespective of abilities that may have. So that's like transhuman. Right? So 1, 2s, and 3s always fail to wound. And then their relic is the Solar Flare. Models once per unit. It's a Lucius model only once per battle. In your movement phase, the bearer can use this relic. If it does so, the bearer's unit and up to 1 friendly Lucius core unit within 3 inches of the bearer can be removed from the battlefield and set back up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from a model. If 2 units are set back up on the battlefield using this relic, both units must be placed wholly within 6 inches of each other. So it's kind of like, was it the Solar Flare or something like that, I think, from, or no, this is Solar Flare. Necrons have something similar to this, where they just take the character and a unit, pull them off the table, redeploy them 9 inches away from enemies somewhere else. So that's really good, especially late game for objective grabbing, getting in somebody's backlines. So very, very handy. And then they get a Teleportarum for their stratagem. So use this before the start of the battle, during declare reserves and transport steps. And if you're playing a mission without this step, use this during the deployment instead. So you can always use this. Select 1 Lucius unit, excluding vehicle units, from your army. And you could set that unit up in the Teleportarum instead of setting it up on the battlefield. If you do so, then in the reinforcement steps of one of your movement phase, you could set it up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So it gives you a deep strike. Because not a lot in the army has deep strike, so deep striking a blob of Rangers or Vanguard or Cataphrons, because it says no vehicles, but Cataphrons are considered pikes now. And you're only able to use this stratagem once, unless you're playing a Strike Force battle, which you could use it twice, or an Onslaught, which you could use it 3 times. So the bigger the game, the more you could use it, which is good. Agrippina, Staunch Defenders. Each time a model with this dogma makes a range attack, that target is within half range, the armor penetration of that attack is improved by 1. So +1 AP for shooting at half range. Very good. Several other armies have that. Again, Necrons really come to mind for that one. Let's see. Each time an enemy unit declares a charge against a unit with this dogma, this unit, if this unit is not engagement range of any other enemy models, it can hold steady or set to defend. So that you normally see with other terrain features, where you can either overwatch on 5-ups or you get a bonus in close combat. Their Warlord trait here in your command phase, you can select one Agrippina core unit within 6 inches of this Warlord. Each time a model in that unit is destroyed by an attack by an enemy model, roll a d6. On a 4-up, they are not removed. The destroyed model from play, it can, after the attacking model is finished making its attacks, either shoot with one of its ranged weapons if it were your shooting phase, or make one attack with one of its melee weapons as if it were your fight phase. Resolve these attacks, or after these attacks are resolved, the destroyed model is removed. So again, a lot of things like Space Marine Ancients with the banners give, on a 4-up, the ability to shoot or make a melee attack. So same thing with the Warlord trait here. Their relic, Agrippina model only, as you would expect. At the start of your shooting phase, select one enemy vehicle within 18 of the bearer. Until the end of that phase, the bearer grants the following ability. Aura, while friendly Agrippina core or Cataphron servitor units within 6 of that model, each time a model in that unit makes an attack that target the selected vehicle unit, you can reroll wound rolls. So basically they call out an enemy vehicle, and anybody within 6 inches of that that relic holder gets to reroll wounds against that particular vehicle. So that could be good with a lot of the Cataphrons with arc rifles, or even if you're just trying to dump a load of fire on a vehicle with your Rangers or your Vanguard or your sterilizers or anything like that, that would benefit from reroll wound rolls. And then Indentured Machines is their stratagem. Here, you select one Agrippina Cataphron Servitors unit from your army and add one to the toughness characteristic of models in that unit. So they would go from toughness 5 to toughness 6. So that makes them a very, very tough troop choice for you at toughness 6. A unit can only be selected for this stratagem once, so you can't make them toughness 7 or toughness 8, but just keep applying it. And you can only use this stratagem once if you're playing a strike force, twice, unless you're playing a strike force. You can only use it once unless you're playing a strike force, then you could use it twice, and then again, onslaught, you could use it 3 times. So just like the Teleportarum one. So you got some really tough Cataphron units with this army. Gyra, alright, refusal to yield. Each time a combat attrition test is taken with this dogma, it's automatically passed. So if you fail a morale, you don't get extra guys to run away. You'll only ever lose 1. And then each time a model with this dogma would lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound, roll a d6. On a 5-up, it is not lost. So that's nice against psychic heavy armies or armies that like to throw out a lot of mortal wounds. Warlord trait, Mantra of Discipline. In your opponent's charge phase, at the start of the Heroic Intervention step, you can select one Gyrek core unit within 9 inches of this Warlord, and until the end of that phase, if that unit's within 6 horizontally and 5 vertically of any enemy units, it's able to perform a Heroic Intervention as if it were a character. And then each time a model makes a Heroic Intervention, it can move up to 6 inches instead of 3. So it's all it is giving one of your units Heroic Intervention that goes in at 6 inches, which is great. Because sometimes people want to try to avoid your close combat units, and they may, get up to maybe movement block you or something. You're like, no, I'm going to heroically intervene and get to you anyway. So that could be fun, especially if you're playing very aggressive against somebody that doesn't want to get up to you but wants to block you maybe. All right, their relic here. Select the Gyra Tech Priest model. Add 3 inches to the range of the bearer's aura abilities to a maximum of 9. Each time the bearer uses an ability in your command phase that specifies a range, you can add 3 inches to the range of that ability, again, up to a maximum of 9. So there's a lot of those types of abilities where in your command phase, you get to pick a unit within 6 inches to get like +1 to hit or increase their range and AP. So there's a lot of different abilities that would benefit from that. Their stratagem, Steel Mind, Iron Logic. Use the stratagem in your opponent's psychic phase. When an enemy psyker attempts to manifest a psychic power within 18 inches of any Gyra unit in your army, roll 1d6. On a 4+, that psychic power is denied. So again, more help against psychers. So that's fun. Stygies. Stygies I used to run quite a bit. I've started trying Mars just because that's what everybody was playing and I'd never played it. But let's see what they did to Stygies. Stygies. Dogma Shroud Protocol. Each time a ranged attack targets a vehicle unit, excluding those with the core keyword. With this dogma, if the attacker is more than 18 inches away, then the target is treated as having the benefit of dense cover for that attack. So you're -1 to hit. But if something ignores dense cover, then it'll ignore this as well. So vehicles, non-core vehicles, over 18 inches away, -1 to hit. And then each time a ranged attack targets a unit excluding vehicles, units without the core keyword, so anybody that's benefited by the first one do not benefit from the second one. If the attacker is more than 12 inches away, then they're treated as having the benefits of dense cover. So non-core vehicles are 18 inches, -1. Everything else in the army is 12 inches away. They count as being in dense cover, so -1. And then each time a unit with this dogma declares a charge, none of the targets of that charge can hold steady or set to defend. So they get a benefit for charging units that are in cover. Mostly ruins, but different types of cover. They'll gain the benefit of that. Alright, their Warlord trait. At the start of the first battle round, you could set up 2 Stygies units wholly within your deployment zone, remove those units from the battlefield, and redeploy them anywhere on the battlefield that is wholly within your deployment zone. If the mission uses strategic reserves, any of those units can be placed into strategic reserves without having to spend the CP, regardless of how many units are already in strategic reserves. Both players have abilities that can redeploy units, roll off, and the winner chooses who redeploys first. So it's just a redeploy, kind of like Ultramarines, I think, have a redeploy stratagem like that. But you can put them in strategic reserves. So if you have a heavy reserve army, you could put your normal ones into strategic reserve, use your Warlord trait and put 2 more units in the strategic reserve, or just move their deployment. This happens a lot if somebody is playing something like this and they want to spread out across their battlefield line and their deployment zone to make their opponent maybe spread out a little bit, and then use this to grab 2 units from one flank and remove it, so that way the enemy is now set up across an empty battlefield to try and mess with their deployment. Or vice versa, maybe blob everything up on one side and then use the stratagem to take 2 heavy hitter units and deploy them all the way on the other side, and your opponent was not expecting to have something over there. So very, very handy. A lot of the game happens and is determined in the deployment, so that's very cool. And then we've got the Omniscient Hand. Stygies model only. Once per battle at the end of the fight phase, you can use this relic. If you do so, roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 12 of the bearer. On a 2 to 5, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound, and on a 6, they suffer d3. So it's just it's a mortal wound bomb. So mostly it's going to do 1 mortal wound. It might do d3, and it's only once per game. So you really want to save this if you're going to take it until you're in the middle of the enemy army. And then Clandestine Infiltration is their stratagem. Use this during the deployment phase. Select 1 Stygies Core Infantry, a unit from your army. When you set that unit up, it could be set up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy deployment zones and enemy models. So it's a forward deploy, and that's not limited. It's just, as far as the number of uses, it's just limited to Stygies Core Infantry. So like the Cataphrons won't count because they're considered bikes now. But you could do it with the new sterilizers or the other flying unit, because they're still infantry and they're core. Cataphrons are not core, so but there's quite a bit you could use that with, so that's cool too. I definitely like that. Ryza, been quite a bit of talk about Ryza lately. Their dogma, red in cog and claw. Each time a model with this dogma makes a melee attack, if it made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn, add 1 to the attack's wound roll. So they're similar to Blood Angels. Everybody's calling them Blood Angels, so they get the same ability there. And then add 1 to charge rolls with this dogma. So they might lean a little bit more into melee, and even if you don't, it makes your non-melee combatants a little bit more powerful, because most of your little infantry guys are strength 3, so normally they'd be wounding, say, a marine on 5s, and might make it down to 4s. If you're Vanguard, where you get the aura of -1 strength, -1 toughness, that'd make your opponent go down to toughness 3, and so you'd be normally wounding on 4s, you'd be wounding on 3s at that point. And there's ways to increase your strength too, so you might even be able to wound Marines in close combat on 2s with some of your basic infantry. So that's a really interesting one to look at, one that I'm interested in because I've been doing a little bit more close combat stuff. Then their Warlord trait here at the start of the fight phase. Select 1 Ryza core unit within 6 until the start of the next fight phase. Each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, the armor penetration characteristic of that attack is improved by 1. So again, your normal basic guys, they don't have any AP on their melee attacks. Now they're +1 AP and +1 to wound. Pretty decent. Makes them a little bit more of a threat, definitely in close combat. Alright, their relic, weapon 99 here, replaces a Volkite blaster, so that's on your Tech Priest Dominus. Range 24, heavy 3, strength 7, -2 damage. And then each time an attack is made with this weapon on an unmodified roll of a 6, it inflicts 2 mortal wounds in addition to any other damage. So compare that to the regular Volkite blaster here real quick. Let's take a look. Let's see here. The regular Volkite blaster is strength 6 minus 0, 2 damage, and then 6s do mortal wounds. So the range is the same, heavy is the same, both heavy 3, but the relic is strength 7 minus 2, 2 damage, and this is 6, 0, 2 damage. So it goes up by 1 strength and 2 AP, so that could be pretty useful. And they are the plasma specialists. So for 2 CP, use this stratagem in your shooting phase when a Ryza unit is selected to shoot. Until the end of that phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack with a plasma weapon, add 1 to the damage characteristic of that attack. So whether you're using the plasma culverins that the troops get, or the plasma big plasma guns that the Cataphrons get, it's +1 damage without having to overcharge. So if you overcharge, it'll do 3 damage instead of 2. So that could be useful against a lot of the like heavy intercessors and stuff that are coming out now with 3 wounds. Alright, House Metallica. Forge World Metallica here. Dogma Relentless March. Everybody likes this one as well. Models in this dogma do not suffer the penalty to hit rolls incurred when firing assault weapons in the same turn that they advanced. So advance and shoot assault weapons, no penalty. Great. Models in this with this dogma do not suffer the penalty to hit rolls when firing heavy weapons in the same turn that they moved. Great. So because your galvanic rifles are a heavy 2, so you could move and shoot your rangers without penalty, or you could advance and shoot your vanguard without penalty. So they're very much a mobile foot infantry army, just being able to move and shoot, no penalties where normally they would. Okay. And then while an enemy unit is within engagement range of units in your army with this dogma, that enemy is treated as being below half strength. So if the enemy has to take a morale test, then they've got models running away on 1s and 2s, even if they're not below half. So it's fun to mess with people's morale that way too. Alright, Warlord Tree. At the end of your movement phase, select 1 enemy unit within 12 inches of this Warlord. Until the start of your next command phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, subtract 1 from that attack's hit roll. So -1 to be hit, for -1 to hit for an enemy unit. And it doesn't specify shooting or close combat, it just says each time they make an attack, so it works for both. So he's probably a good support for those models moving up the field to help protect them. You know, throw it on a unit with a bunch of shots or something, they're all -1 to hit in shooting and melee. It's great. Alright, the Adamantine Arm for the Relic. It doesn't replace anything, it just basically gives them a new weapon. It's melee weapon, strength ×3, -3, 4 damage. Each time the bear fights, no more than 1 attack can be made with this weapon. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, add 1 to that attack's hit roll. So normally with a servo arm, you'll subtract 1 to hit, and you could only use it once. This adds 1 to hit, so most things will be hitting on 3s, because most stuff isn't very melee oriented, and then you could change it to hit on 2s. So that's pretty good. Only 1 attack though, but at least it's strength 3 or strength ×3 -3, 4 damage. So if it does hit and go through, it's going to do a nice little chunk. So there's that, and then Deafening Assault. It's their stratagem. Use the stratagem in your shooting phase when a Metallica unit from your army is selected to shoot. select one enemy unit, excluding vehicle units, within 12 inches of that unit. Until the start of your next turn, have the movement characteristics from models in that enemy unit, and that enemy unit cannot fire Overwatch or is set to defend. So again, helpful against units that want to be able to either move past you, so you are able to have their movement, or also very useful against units that want to Overwatch or set to defend against you. So like a unit of flamers or something like that want to just hose you down with fire. They can't Overwatch you. Or units that are hiding in terrain and want to accept your charge and then get the bonus in close combat. They can't do that either. So pretty handy. We get our custom Forge Worlds here. The Rad Saturated Forge World and the Expansionist Forge World are two that I really like. So you get a primary and then 3 secondaries to choose from. They lay it out much better here than I think that they did in the Psychic Awakening book, because it just seems a little bit easier to read to me. So if you do tongue-tied here, huh? Rad Saturated Forge World, each time a ranged attack targets a core unit with this dogma, if the attacker is more than 12 inches away, subtract 1 from the strength characteristic of that attack. So you got Space Marines on the other side of the board shooting you with a bunch of bolters that are strength 4. Now they're strength 3. Now it's not so bad. So again, a lot of your units are toughness 3, toughness 4. So instead of wounding on 3s or 4s, they're wounding on 4s and 5s. That definitely helps your survivability. And then, so no matter what, if you do a Rad Saturated Forge World, you always get that one. And then you've got a choice from these next 3. Extreme Rad Saturation Aura. While an enemy unit excluding a vehicle is within 3 inches of a unit with this ability, subtract 1 from the strength and toughness characteristic of models in that unit. So normally the Rad Saturation is within 1 inch. This makes it 3 inches. So your Vanguard units and your Sulfur Hounds can actually run up to units, make them within 3, and then subtract their strength and toughness by 1. So that's really good for just being able to put more wounds on an opponent. So now, Death Guard go down to toughness 4 instead of 5. You're reducing that for them. And then even if you fall back, right? Say they get you in combat, but you want to be able to shoot, you fall back. You only go back, you're 2 inches, 3 inches, so you're not in their engagement range anymore, and they're still suffering that -1 strength, -1 toughness. So very, very handy. Scarifying Weaponry is the next one. Add 1 to strength and improve the armor penetration characteristic of 1 of radium weapons models with this dogma are equipped with. So all your Vanguard and your Skitarii Marshals, now with all their rad weapons or radium weapons, are now +1 strength and AP on those guns. Normally the radium carbines, for example, are strength 3, AP nothing, 1 damage. Well, now they're strength 4, AP 1. So it makes them like bolt rifles, like Primaris bolt rifles, which is great. And then you could use other stuff to buff them up even further. And they're Assault 3. So they're super shooty, super killy, very cool with that Scarifying Weapons. That's the one I think I like the most out of these 3. The next one is Machine God's Chosen. Each time a combat attrition test is taken for this unit, ignore any or all modifiers. Not that great to me. Most of the time you don't have to worry about combat attrition too much, and if you do, you're only generally losing a few models. So the only time that would really come into play is if you're facing somebody that gives you additional modifiers to your combat attrition tests, and that's not very often at this point in time. Alright, the next one here is the Expansionist Forge World. Their primary here is each time a unit with this dogma fights, if it made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn, then until that fight is resolved, the armor penetration characteristic of melee weapons models in that unit are equipped with are improved by 1. So that's another -1 armor pen in close combat, and that's for everybody, which is great. There's secondary, 3 options here. Forward operations, start of the first battle round. Each Skitarii core model in your army with this dogma can make a normal move of up to 3 inches. This is in addition to any other abilities that they may have that allow them to make a normal move. They cannot end this move within 9 inches of an enemy model. So I think that in addition, I think that's like the Cerberus Raiders who get a move beforehand. So it could be useful. 3 inches isn't that big overall, but I think it does add up little by little, depending on what you're trying to use it for. Maybe be able to sneak onto an objective, or get into a little bit better field of view, or even if you end up going second, maybe pulling a unit back behind cover so they can't be seen. So that could be really interesting. The next one here is add 6 inches to the range characteristic of rifle and carbine weapons that models with this dogma are equipped with. And there's no max to that, so there are other abilities that increase your range as well, so those will stack. So that'd make your radium carbines 24 inches, and then your galvanic rifles 36 inches. But it's all weapons, so that's quite a bit. You know, all your heavy weapons, your vehicles, all their weapons are get an additional 6 inches. Some of the range weapons on the Castellan robots changed, so again from 24 inches up to 30 inches. It's great all around, because that also changes rapid fire weapons, right? It gives them an extra 3 inches on their rapid fire, because it's a half. And then Rugged Explorers models in this unit do not suffer penalty to hit rolls incurred for firing heavy weapons in the same turn that they moved. And then vehicle models do not suffer penalty to hit rolls incurred for firing assault weapons in the same turn that they advanced. So this one's a little bit different than what we were looking at earlier. This one is only heavy weapons for everybody, and then vehicles can advance and shoot assault weapons without penalty. The main ones I could think of for the vehicles and assault weapons would probably be the Scorpius disintegrators, because I believe the Cognis are assault now. I think the other guns are heavy. We'll have to double check that. But the Iron Strider Ballisteri, they're all assault weapons, and they're quick anyway, so they gives them advance and shoot without penalty. Makes them really nasty, and they're already good. Alright, next one here. Data Horde Forge World. Each time a vehicle with this dogma would lose a wound, roll a d6. On a 6, it's not lost. So if you're going to go vehicle heavy, that really helps out. Omnitrack Impellers add 2 inches to the movement characteristic of Cataphrons and Onager Doomcrawlers. So again, a little bit extra movement, not bad. But again, you'd really want to lean heavily into Cataphrons and Doomcrawlers at that point, which would kind of make sense if you're going with this anyway, because the Cataphron or the Doomcrawlers are vehicles, but the Cataphrons are bikes. So. Auto Savant Spirits. At the start of your command phase, each vehicle model in your army with this dogma regains 1 lost wound. So it's an auto heal for vehicles. Models with this dogma whose Characteristic can be changed as they suffer damage, are considered to double the number of remaining wounds for the purpose of determining what those characteristics are. So your big vehicles, your Scorpius, Disintegrators, Doom Crawlers, and Doom Riders double their characteristics, and the Flyers, I believe, also double their characteristics. And the last one here, each time a model with this dogma makes a ranged attack with a Cognus weapon that targets a unit within half range, you can reroll the hit roll. So just reroll hit rolls for Cognus weapons within half. So there's not a ton of Cognus weapons, but it could definitely be extremely useful for those Cognus heavy stubbers, Cognus las cannons, Cognus auto cannons on, again, those Iron Striders and your tanks. And again, that makes sense with the 6-up ignore. So if you're planning on going vehicle heavy, that's probably what you want to go with. All right, next one. Our primary here is each time a core model with this dogma makes a ranged attack on an unmodified wound roll of a 6, the armor penetration characteristic is improved by 1. So 6 is to wound, +1 rend. Great. And that's core units. You've got a ton of core in this army, so that works out really well. And then your secondaries you get to choose from. Each time, this is the data bleed generators. Each time an enemy model makes a melee attack against a unit with this dogma, if that enemy model had made a charged move, was charged, or heroically intervened, subtract 1 from the hit roll. So -1 to be hit, it's always good. If for your enemies, great. In melee. Next one, Purified Data Sphere. Add 3 inches to the range of aura abilities, excluding the rad saturation ability of units with this dogma to a maximum of 9 inches. Again, overlapping auras is very important. The reason why they don't do it to the rad saturation is because they've got that over here in the rad saturated Forge world. So they wanted to make sure that that one was unique and give you a reason to take that. Otherwise, it would be the same thing and more. So you probably would never take that one unless you just wanted the subtract 1 strength from ranged weapons. And then engineered nanophage. Each time a melee attack is made by a model with this dogma, allocated to a model with a saves characteristic of 3+ or better, the armor penetration characteristic is improved by 1. So it's kind of like the grav cannons, right? Where the better the opponent's save is, the better you become. So against Marines or anything with a 3+ save, you get +1 to your AP value. Again, that's melee only. So this is actually kind of nice and balanced. The primary helps with ranged attacks, like this helps with melee. Add 3 inches to your range of auras helps everything, and then the data bleed, subtract 1 from being hit. So you could kind of double down on the primary and then the data bleed for shooting, or the engineered nanophages to give you a little bit more well balanced, I think. And then the slave system Forge world just lets you pick one of the main ones. All right, stratagems.